Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our PCT or Pacific Crest Trail workshop. I am Erin, or my trail name Speed Goat, and then this is my sister, Maggie. She goes by Riveter on the trail. So we thru hiked the Appalachian Trail together in 2022 and recently completed the PCT in 2024. Something that we wish we would have had preparing for our first thru hike was having another thru hiker to talk to really sort through all of the information. So this is what Trails Unpacked was kind of born from, was providing a way for aspiring thru hikers to be able to talk to thru hikers about their experience. So we are by no means claiming to be experts, but we're just hoping that our experience can help you feel a little bit more comfortable on trail. Now you will see on our website, we do have a couple more workshops that go into a little bit more depth from what the topics that we're going to talk about today, but just kind of use this as a little guide and almost like a little appetizer to the content that we have out there. So this is PCT specific, but we do have other content out there that goes more into the specifics of the trail or thru hiking in general. So some things we're going to talk about today are permits, what your first day will look like on the PCT, gear, a general conversation about resupply, budgeting on the trail, and then helpful apps.
So first with permits, and here is the big thing about the PCT is that it has a permit to hike it. And this permit, the long distance permit, basically conglomerates all of the smaller permits into one large permit. So you go through many national forests and national parks that require a permit to be camping in that area. And your PCT permit kind of gives you blanket access to all of those to use for your long distance trek. That being said, you do not have to have a long distance permit to hike the PCT. You do have the option to do these permits individually as you need to if you cannot get a long distance permit. Now, there's one other permit that I want to mention that kind of gets forgotten about, and this is NOBO specific. Because when you finish your hike going northbound, you finish at the Canadian border, you have two kind of off options. One is 30 miles back to Hart's Pass into the United States and then most likely out through Seattle, or you can hike 8 miles out through the Canadian side to a small kind of like camping resort called Manning Park, and then from there proceed with your travel. However, to enter into Canada at this border crossing, you need to have what's called a Canadian entry permit. You can find the link to this permit on the PCTA website, and you can apply for it 6 months in advance of you entering. It is specific for PCT hikers, and it has to be on your phone or printed when you enter Canada. And here's the thing, the turnaround time is very long. It is legitimately 8 to 12 weeks. There were so many people who we met who were waiting on their permit and unable to get it by the time that they got to the border because they applied too late in trail. Because the permit has such a wide span of when it's allowable, we highly recommend applying for your permit before you leave for trail. We applied the week before we left for trail, and we had ours ready to go within the first 200 miles of trail, and then we never had to sweat it. It's also a free permit, so even if you don't know if you want to go into Canada, it doesn't hurt to just apply for it and then get it and then make your decision when you get there.
Yeah, and just another thing with the permit, with the time frame of it, allow yourself time in case something happens if it gets rejected and you have to fill it out again. That way, if you do it before trail, it gives you more time for that. And the permit does not negate the fact that you still need a passport to enter into Canada and come back to the US.
So we're going to take a look at day one. We're going to start with NOBO, and then we do have a slide for our SOBOs out here. So NOBOs. You are most likely going to be coming in through San Diego. That is going to be your closest major airport. And lucky for you, there is a shuttle that runs from San Diego out to Campo/Cleef Campground. And you will hear those terms used interchangeably. Campo is technically the town. Cleef Campground is in Campo, about half a mile from the terminus. And this same shuttle is also run by the folks who oversee Cleef Campground, and they are actually former PCT thru hikers. And I cannot recommend this experience enough. The cost was $15 a person, and we were able to pay when we got there, Venmo or cash. It does include breakfast the next morning, which is still some of the favorite pancakes Speedgoat has ever had on trail. They have flush toilets. You set up your tent and camp there. And then they have like a covered meeting area. So you can meet other thru hikers, everyone getting ready to start. And like, just what a phenomenal experience to all come together to meet people, the excitement. It's just a phenomenal atmosphere. This also allows you to come into Campo the night before, and you can kind of stay there and then get started fresh in the morning. We just found with sun exposure, that's just a lot better way to start your first day. Sometimes the PCTA is here handing out the hang tags that you might see on packs. Unfortunately, they don't post when they are going to be where and for what times or how many tags they'll have. So honestly, it's just kind of luck of the draw if you catch them. We did not get our hang tags until the Sierras. So about 700 miles in, when we just happened to run into a PCTA ambassador. For our SOBOs, this is the Hearts Pass that I mentioned before. You are not allowed to enter the US through Canada. The United States does not recognize unmanned border crossings. So you're pretty much forced to start from the US side at Hearts Pass, and then you have to hike 30 miles north to the terminus and then start your journey SOBO. There is a town close by to Hearts called Mazama, and most people will hitch, or you can arrange a ride from Mazama up to Hearts Pass. This is also a common resupply point for NOBOs. So Mazama is very used to hikers, and there is a hiker community, and comments on Far Out are very positive about Mazama, about the lodging there for hikers, and about the shuttling services to and from. Mazama is about 4.5 hours from Seattle. I've seen different things online. We did not go SOBO, so I cannot speak about this personally, but I have seen different comments online about how people got from Mazama to Seattle, from paying for like extended rides and going in on it with many hikers and arranging that through Facebook. Again, Far Out and Facebook is great tools for this to find other people traveling from Seattle over to Mazama. The one good news is that once you go up and come back down, you know your first resupply point, which will be back at Mazama.
So now that we've talked a little bit about your first day, we can talk about some things that you can do to help prepare for your thru hike. So we met a lot of hikers on the Appalachian Trail when they first had started out that were very specific about the miles that they were going to hike, from only doing 8 miles to increasing to 10 and then 12. And I don't think that you need to be that specific about the miles that you're going to hike and how you're going to kind of physically ramp up your hiking. I think it just adds a lot of pressure on you. I think that you overall just need to listen to your body, and just like any other training program, just start off slow and increase your mileage and your speed as you go. So this is where physical training prior to trail can come in. Not only will you be a little bit faster and maybe be able to hike a little bit more miles from the start if you're active in your everyday life. But you will also have a better understanding of how your body feels um, going through strenuous exercise and being highly active. You'll be able to better understand what the difference is when your body is maybe sore or if you're having an injury. Um, so physical training also encompasses recovery. So there are some things that you can do before trail to make sure that you are getting a good recovery once you get onto trail. One of those things is going to be your sleep. So making sure that you're able to get good sleep on trail. And this will be testing out your sleep system. Try out your pad, whatever you're going to use, and see if it's comfortable for you. Try out your pillow. I know a lot of people try to save space by using their clothes in a stuff sack. I particularly did not find that to be comfortable, so I got an inflatable pillow. Riveter even had 2 inflatable pillows. So just making sure that you can have good sleep while you're on trail. Now, another thing is to do some stretching. Now, you can do this before you get on trail, but then once you're on trail, start doing stretching during extended breaks. So especially if you're going to be taking a siesta or a lunch, stretch in those times, stretch at the end of the day. It's going to help you not have as bad of a hiker hobble. And then nutrition. So once you're on trail, I know the confines of a hiker diet filled with Snicker bars and Pop-Tarts, but if anything, try to have a high calorie and high protein meal at dinner time, and this will help your body recover in the evening. Now, Riveter had kind of touched on this before. When going into gear, and specifically in the desert and Northern California, it is going to be hot. And a word that you're going to get used to is exposed. So we recommend investing in a long sleeve shirt to keep you protected from the sun and the high UV index. If it has a hood, that's even better. I know it sounds crazy in the desert to have long sleeves and a hood, but any shade that you can get is going to be welcomed. The same with a hat with a rim on it. I'm going to give you a little bit more shade and you'll be a lot more comfortable. Another thing with the sun shirt, if you can get one that has buttons on it, we really enjoyed that because we were able to unbutton some of the buttons and kind of make what we called hobo air conditioning, which is just getting some airflow in your shirt when there is a cross breeze to help cool you down. Now, on the topic of shade, umbrellas seem to be a common controversial item. I think if you have one, it's great. You are likely going to enjoy it. We did not carry umbrellas, and I don't think that I would go back and change that decision. It's just one of those luxury items that you may or may not choose to carry. Now, when you're on the PCT, you are going to get dirty. You're going to be very dirty. Dirt is likely going to be your common cause of blisters, so invest in a pair of gaiters just to help minimize the amount of dirt that gets in your shoes. Now, even with gaiters, your feet are going to be dirty, so get into the habit of cleaning them daily, but the gaiters will help. Now, on the other side of things, the PCT is known, to have the big fluctuations in weather. So you have the desert, and then you have areas like the Sierras, and then even Washington, where it gets cold. So staying warm. With your sleep system, we had a 20-degree quilt, and that was comfortable for the entire trail. We did not pair that with any sleeping bag liner, and I don't think that you really need that. One thing to consider is your sleeping pad and the R value that it has. The higher the R value, the warmer it's going to be. And that might also dictate what degree quilt that you're going to get. And then remember, if you have thermals, like thermal sleepwear, this is going to keep you a little bit warmer. A plug here for gear brands. We are huge advocates of Enlightened Equipment. That was the quilt that we had. We absolutely loved it. And then for thermals, we skipped the expensive thermals and went with Cuddle Duds, which you can find in Target, you can find at Walmart, Sam's Club, and just go for those. They're equally as warm and equally as light. And those kind of items, the warm kind of items, you can send home or have sent to trail. You don't have to carry those for the whole extent of the thru hike. Now, moving on to electronics and technology, I would say we were pretty basic in our electronics. We really tried to limit the amount of items that we needed to have charged while on trail. So we used wired headphones and little like Casio digital watches. So the only things that we were actively charging when we were on trail was our phone and our headlamp. So when you are looking at a battery bank, we would say at least a 10,000 milliamp battery bank would be necessary. That'll get you like 2 to 3 phone charges depending on the type of phone that you have. Now, if you are carrying some other items that need to be charged, consider that, and you might need a battery bank that is a little bit larger. Now, I will say on the PCT, I carried a battery bank that was 20,000 milliamps. I never ran out of charges on that thing. So it's up to, your comfortabilities and how much stuff that you have to charge. Now, when we're talking about the charging port, this is the little block that you're actually going to put into the wall. Make sure that your charging port has at least 2 ports to it. That way you can charge multiple things at once. And then make sure one of them has PD charging or power delivery charging. And this just means that it's going to charge faster. That is super helpful, especially with your battery bank, because those things can take hours to charge. It's horrible having to stay somewhere just to charge stuff. So if you have the power delivery, it's going to go a little bit faster. So just like we kind of talked about with some of the gear, the desert section is going to be hot and it is going to be exposed. The heat is going to peak usually between 1 and 5 p.m. The West Coast heat, if you're not familiar with this, is a dry heat, which I don't think we really knew until we got over there. But it means that the temperature will drop when you are not in direct sunlight. So if you are in the shade or even in the nighttime, the temperature does come down. So when you are hiking, look for shade comments to combat exposure. But then on the opposite side, look for comments that say this area is exposed. If there's an exposed section, you might want to consider changing maybe your day of hiking. Either hike that section early in the morning before the sun is at full peak, or in the evening time when the sun is going down. Get comfortable with the idea of changing your hiking pattern too. So this might mean that you're waking up like super early in the morning or even night hiking just to not be in the sun. It also may mean that you're taking siestas or long breaks during the day. And this is, again, just to limit the amount of time that you're in the heat. Know, though, that you will get respite from the sun in the evening times. It is very nice to be able to sleep in cool temperatures. It almost makes you forget what the next day is going to bring. On the water side, you're also going to want to get into the habit of checking water postings. We checked every evening, that way we could get an idea of where the water was going to be for the next day. And when we say check water postings, we mean check every icon on Far Out. People will post stuff about water under anything, under road crossings, under a little shelter, or not shelter, but tent sites. They'll post stuff everywhere. And when you're looking at those comments, look at the date that that comment was made. If it was made within the past day, that might be a more reliable source. If the comment was made 5 days ago, that might be a little bit more unreliable, or just know that the water could have changed in that time frame. There are a couple of water caches that are on trail, and most of these water caches are massive. They're like 50 up to like 100 gallons of water, and they're maintained by trail angels. So these sources are usually very reliable, and people will put comments on these caches too to say how much is left. But just know that the trail angels are watching comments on Far Out, and they are coming every couple of days to see how the water is. So those caches can be a reliable source for you. Now, I know everyone makes the water carries seem super bad. I know I probably scared you a little bit with the water section, but know that water is available. It's just that you have to plan it out a little bit more. Our longest carry was 20 miles, so it really isn't that bad. You just have to get into the habit of planning your hike around it. And some of the tips that I talked about with the heat can also help with the water. So if you are limiting the amount of time that you're exposed in the sun, you're not going to be as hot. You're probably not going to drink as much water.
So I'm going to talk about the reverse of that, and that is snow. And typically when people refer to snow on the PCT, they're talking about the Sierras. There are a couple other spots that will have snow, and if you're going NOBO, these are going to be the areas you might encounter at first, depending when you're starting. That's around San Jacinto and Fuller Ridge, and then possibly Baden-Powell before you get into the Sierras. However, even though this is a recorded video and you could be watching this any point, if you are watching this video and you are currently not hiking the PCT, I can tell you that it is too early to be purchasing snow equipment. The snow situation changes very rapidly, and so many people, and we saw this our year hiking, bought snow equipment, micro spikes and an ice axe, which are expensive and also heavy gear, and then had it sent to them and mailed out to trail. By the time they got it on trail, snow was not a problem. The situation had resolved, and now they are stuck with two expensive items that they can either pay the cost of reshipping, which is not going to be cheap, or they're just carrying it with them. I mean, the situation can change so fast that in the time you ask someone to mail it to you on trail a week ahead of time, by the time it gets to you, you might find that you won't need it. We did go through the Sierras in the end of June, July timeframe. And as you can see from this photo, this is from our year. And we did have a couple miles of snow, I would say, total across the Sierras, particularly on the north face of mountain passes where the snow doesn't melt as quickly. But we never were in a position where we felt like we needed snow gear to do it. And we did walk across snow. The trekking poles were enough for that. Now, this being said, let's say you get to any of these places listed here, and the recommendation really is to get snow gear. There are gear shops in Idlewild and in Kennedy Meadows South that sell snow equipment. That's micro spikes and an ice axe, and you can purchase it there. And ultimately, you will probably save yourself money buying it only if you really need it than to buy it beforehand, ship it, and then have to ship it back. And so what do we, when we're talking about snow gear, and I mentioned here spikes and an ice axe. So what are we talking about here with terms of gear? So sometimes you'll hear people use the term micro spikes and crampons interchangeably. They are not the same thing. Crampons are much more heavy duty and they're used in mountaineering. For through hiking purposes, you're really looking at micro spikes and you just kind of slip them over your shoe. They work on trail runners and then it helps give you grip. However, just a reminder that micro spikes only really help in ice or like densely packed snow. In this picture here, we are climbing up the Blue Blaze on San Jacinto. This snow was too mushy. The microspakes would not have helped us very much on it, which is another reason why, again, wait and see what the snow situation is like. Lastly, an ice axe, and this is just kind of a word of caution, of warning, is that there is a very specific way to use an ice axe to where it would be helpful for you in the need of self-arresting or helping yourself through snow. And if you don't know how to use an ice axe, the tool itself is not helpful for you. So if you ultimately have never used an ice axe, if you don't even know how to use it, I would reconsider purchasing it because it's probably not going to help you. And in that case, you might want to rethink when you go through a snow section if you hear that that snow section would require an ice axe. So we're going to talk about the two kind of areas here where we sent ourselves some extra gear and then sent it back. This also might be the Sierra section where if you do need, again, that snow gear, you might get it. Here we're specifically talking about clothing, and this is the leggings and the thermal that we mentioned earlier. So we did not need it for the rest of the PCT, and so to save ourselves the weight, we mailed that to and from trail as needed. And this is what I would call our cold weather gear. So we, the entire hike, had our Enlightened Equipment Puffy, which is very light, warm, but light. And so we use that as kind of our warmth for every day. And so when I'm talking about cold weather gear, I'm meaning hat, gloves, and then thermals for sleeping. And so we had that in the Sierras in Washington. Looking back, we did not need it in the Sierras. I mean, I don't think I wore it at all. So if I were to do the PCT again, I would not use that in the Sierras. It was not necessary. In Washington, and we were in Washington in September, 100% needed it. It was cold at night in Washington. It was also an early rain year, so it was just nice to have warm clothes to change into at night. This kind of overlaps nicely with the bear can requirements. So you probably know about the famous bear can requirement through the Sierras, and it is a hard-sided container, meaning it is absolutely a bear can. And it now extends through the Tahoe Basin, which is basically all the way up to Truckee. So Kennedy Meadow South to Truckee, and then reverse that if you're going SOBO. It is really common for people to rent their bear cans from Triple Crown Outfitters that is run by Yogi. And you can arrange with her the pickup. If you are going NOBO, you just get it there in Kennedy Meadow South and mail it back once you get to Truckee or Sierra City. However, one thing that had started 2 years ago actually, was a food storage requirement in the Mount Baker Snoqualmie National Forest up in Washington. And for NOBOs, this is around the 300 or the 2,300 mile marker. And the outright Forest Service order, and you can look it up, requires a bear can, an ursack, or a proper bear hang, which means it has to be X amount of feet off the ground, away from the tree, and down the branch. We did not see this, but we had heard that rangers were out enforcing this mandate because it was so new and the fines were very costly. And they were enforcing it to the point of making sure even the bear hangs were legal. We opted then to have our bear cans sent back out to us and carried it through that stretch. I will say, having been through that area, I think it would be very hard to throw a legal bear hang. The trees are not conducive for it, and there are even times when you are not by trees. And we do have significant experience throwing bear hangs from hiking the Appalachian Trail, where that is one of the most popular forms. And so this area was just not great for it. Having the bear can, though, it was not all bad. It is extra weight, but the critters in Washington are on the next level. I mean, these are steroid mice, if I can say anything. They were constantly around our tent. I mean, I was like batting them off the tent sides a couple nights. And so it was really nice to have our food in the bear cans. They left us alone when that was the case. When we were sleeping with our food in our vestibule, it was a very restless night.
Yeah, it was almost like Ratatouille outside of our tents. If only they would have cooked for us.
So we're going to talk about resupply, which is the topic that I think everyone has the most questions about. And I'm going to add a huge asterisk right here is that you cannot plan a resupply for an entire through hike before through hiking. You cannot even plan your entire resupply for a through hike when you are in the middle of your through hike. You're really looking, when you're thinking about resupplying, is resupply to resupply every 3 days to every 5 days. You just need to know how much food to buy at that point to get you to the next point to buy food. So I know right now, pre-trail, you really want to plan it all out. You want to look at the maps. You want to know what's going on. But I would really advise you to just try not to do that. It's going to stress yourself out. You are probably going to make decisions that you won't make when you're there on trail. And just focus on the first couple resupplies so you know how much food to start with, and then you have an idea when you're getting going where you're going to be stopping. So on the PCT, our average resupply was every 3 to 5 days, and our longer carries, were 5 to 5.5 days. And I will say it's not because there was not another option. It was because we were avoiding inconvenient town stops. Primarily in the Sierras, it's just difficult to get out of the Sierras. You have to do blue blazes, basically bonus miles, and we were just trying to limit those. But that's not because it wasn't available. The PCT does not go directly through many towns or resupply points. Almost all of them are off trail, driving distance off trail. Typically 15 to 20 minutes. However, there are some that are a lot further away, up to an hour drive away. Our primary form of this was hitching. We did it most of the AT and pretty much the entire PCT. It has been a reliable form of transportation for us. However, if you are not comfortable hitching, there's a very strong Trail Angel network on the PCT. If you click on far out any of the road icons, typically roads that lead to towns, a lot of other people will post names of Trail Angels and also kind of give their endorsement of them. So you'll see, oh, ride with so and so, they were great, or hey, avoid this person. A lot of for-profit places as well might post what their rate is for you to call or text or anything like that. There's also a Trail Angels Facebook group that a lot of hikers join with the Trail Angels, and then you can post about needing a ride and kind of get responses there. And so this might be our most controversial statement and stance ever. And it is that it is not necessary to send food only resupply boxes. And I really want to double down on this food only part. So this means you are only sending this box as a means of resupply. It does not have contacts, it does not have shoes, it does not have medications. That falls into a different category. The other caveat I'm going to put on this is if you don't have a dietary restriction. If you are vegan or gluten-free or something like that, you might have a hard time finding food. And so understandably, food resupply boxes might be a necessity for you. But otherwise, we have never come to a resupply that was so limited, we were unable to buy food. We did not send ourselves any packages on the PCT. On the AT, we sent ourselves 5 resupply packages, but they were just for fun. They were food that we had mass ordered on Amazon and thought they would be treats for ourselves. And spoiler alert, they were not. We almost dreaded the fact that we sent those boxes and would not do it again. And there are quite a few reasons for this. It's just being you don't know what you're going to want to eat and you don't know how to prepare the box properly. However, you definitely might have points you need to send yourself packages. If you are mailing items other than food, we're going to talk about shoes in a second. So know that that is absolutely something that happens, and I even mail myself shoes on trail. And also, just one thing to keep in mind, you can also send yourself a box on trail to further up trail. The USPS flat rate boxes are 2 days shipping. So if you know your next resupply point doesn't sound great, or maybe you're at a Walmart and it's phenomenal and has all your stuff, trust me, you're going to get to a point where a Walmart sounds like a palace. You might want to send yourself a box for your next resupply, in the next 4 days. You can absolutely do that. So don't think that you have to send it before trail, or otherwise you have no way to get a box. And so, as I mentioned this, Sierras are going to probably be your longest carries because there are blue blazes and bonus miles involved. Our longest blue blaze was 8 miles one way, which was a 16-mile round trip up and down a mountain pass. So you can imagine how fun that is. But you have to factor that into your resupply, right? Like that is now time that we are taking to hike this, even though it is not trail miles. It is only for a short section though, so I wouldn't worry too much about it. There are other options. You can come out of the Sierras at multiple points if you want. It just requires more of those blue blazes.
So like Riveter said, our primary source of getting into towns and getting back to trail was hitching. With that being said, though, you do not have to hitch if you do not want to. There are enough trail angels on the PCT and even shuttle services and public transportation that can get you to and from town or even around town. The only thing with that is if you are going to use a trail angel, just know that you might have to set it up beforehand. Hitching is a little bit of I don't know if it's easier, but more convenient method of transportation than a trail angel because you don't have to set it up beforehand or stick to a certain time frame for it. I do want to give you some tips on how to hitch. That way you're more successful and hopefully don't have to stand out there for a long time. So one thing, it might seem pretty basic, but smile and wave. Even if a car cruises right by you, wave at them. We had so many people who turned back around to get us, and I know they wouldn't have done that if we flicked them off as they were going by. Another thing is to look as clean as you can, which I know is difficult on the PCT, but even if it's just wiping your face off a little bit or changing into your sleep clothes to look less dirty, that is going to help. Also, not wearing rain gear unless it's actively raining. Think about if you were going to pull over for somebody, how you would want them to get in your car, and if you would want to pick up somebody who looked excessively dirty or super wet. Unlike Riveter in this picture, try not to wear sunglasses or anything that's going to constrict your face. Just try to look visible. And then the last thing is try to make sure that your pack is visible. And this might be you having to take it off and set it in front of you, but this helps you look like a thru hiker. We had a lot of people who had stopped to pick us up to give us a ride, and they told us they stopped because we look like backpackers and not like traditional hitchhikers. So anything that you can do to make yourself look like a backpacker. Now, with all of that, if a car does stop and you don't feel comfortable, you don't have to get in that car. You can politely decline the ride. You can make up a lie and say, I forgot something back on trail, and go grab it. Overall, you don't owe anybody anything if they stop to give you a ride. And you can always ask another hiker to hitch with you. We did that before, and we've had other people ask to hitch with us. There are likely going to be a lot of people going into town or coming out of town at the same time, and people are very welcoming and friendly, so you can always hitch with somebody else. Now, again, like Riveter said, we do not recommend trying to plan out all of your resupplies from the start. but you are going to need to know your first resupply or even your second resupply, because you'll need to know how much food that you're going to carry from the beginning. So first, for NOBOers, um, the first resupply is actually going to be around mile 20 at Lake Morena. This is pretty small. It's a little like gas station. They have like snacks and sodas and things like that. They more have like hot foods like hamburgers and they have meatloaf and some other kind of hot foods, but they do have other snacks that you can pick up. But your first major town that you're going to resupply at is in Julian, which is 77 miles in. Julian has a couple of different little grocery stores. They also have a great gear store. It's small, but it has everything that a thru hiker might need. Because Julian is the biggest town, that first trail town, they have a great network of trail angels that are frequently making stops around the trail at Scissors Crossing, where you will get off to go into town. And they are always doing rides to and from. At that trail shop or at the gear shop, they also have a little sign up for a shuttle to get back to town. So you can sign up there for a time to get back there. So great town, highly recommend. The next place is going to be Warner Springs. This is at mile 109 or 32 miles from Julian. This is a singular gas station, but don't let that fool you. It does have plenty of snacks and stuff. I will say the dinner options are a little bit more limited. It's going to be more of your basic like mashed potatoes and Knorr sides, but it definitely has stuff that you can resupply. They also have like hot foods. They have brats and other little microwavable things that you can get. So you can have a hot meal there. We even packed out some of the brats for dinner that night. For SOBOers, your first resupply is going to be at Mazama. So like Riveter said, on your first day, it will technically, even though on far out it's 30.5 miles, because you'll have to go in through Harts Pass, go up to the border and come back, it will be a round trip of 60 miles. Now, we did not stop into Mazama, but I know a lot of other people did, and they were able to successfully resupply from there. And then they do have a bus that will take you to a larger grocery store. The next place after that is Tehican, which is 50 miles away from Mazama. This is a little bit more limited. There is a bus, though, that will take you from trail down to Tehican, and about like halfway between the trail and then the town of Tehican, there's like a little bakery. They have a lot of, bakery items, pastries. They also have like pizza and sandwiches and stuff like that. It is definitely a must. You can get some kind of town food there. So for shoes, trail runners are the most common shoe on the trail, and these are usually good for 500 miles, more or less depending on the type of shoe you get, the terrain, and just your overall hiking pattern. But with that being said, you will go through about 5 pairs when you're on the PCT. We do urge you to buy your shoes while you are on trail versus prior to trail and having them sent to you. I'm going to put Riveter on blast here, but when she was on the AT, she hiked in different shoes for every single shoe resupply.
It happens.
Yep. She's just trying to find the right shoe that fit for her. And then when she finally found that right shoe, she bought them all before the PCT and was going to have them sent out to her. And then her feet swelled on the trail, and she ended up having to buy a bigger size of shoe and couldn't use the last pair that she had bought. So with that whole story, things change on trail, and you don't know until you are on trail. So we would really recommend waiting to buy shoes until you're physically on trail, either at a gear store or buying them and having them sent to trail. Now, there are a couple of gear stores that are on trail, and those can be useful, particularly if you're having troubles with the shoes that you're in. Some of the people that work there might be able to give you some recommendations of different shoes to switch to, or you can try on something a little bit different. So that would be the main benefit of a gear store there. And normally, the gear stores on the PCT have Ultras and Hokas. That was the most readily available shoes that we saw there. If you hike in different shoes, you might want to consider just having shoes sent to you. Know also if you wear any specialty sizes, like I wear a wide, I can never find them in a gear store. So I usually just buy my shoes and have them sent to trail. So like I said, we would recommend ordering shoes to trail. That way it ensures that you have the exact shoes in the size that you want. Now, if you are going to send yourself shoes, remember that USPS general delivery is meant for only USPS. So if you use a different carrier like FedEx or UPS and try to send it general delivery, USPS will either decline the shipment entirely, or when you go to pick it up, they will make you pay for the shipping on that. So if you are in doubt of what carrier is being used, have it sent to a hostel, hotel, gear shop, something else on trail. Now, some shoe brands will let you decide what carrier you want to use. So I hike in Topos, and they allow you to choose between USPS and then a FedEx, which is great. So you might have an option there.
We have a blog post and another YouTube video specifically on how to send packages on trail and how to receive them and tips for that. Everything from how to find an address to send to how to address and label the box and the like. I will link that in the description below.
And for budgeting, this is specifically going to be more budgeting when you are on trail and expectations that you can set about the cost of things on trail. Our biggest expense when we were through hiking was going into town and specifically taking 0 days. So like you can expect, taking zeros, the more zeros you take, likely the longer you are going to be out on the trail. So of course, that's just more money right there. But also when you're in town, you have the cost of either a hotel or hostel stay, any food that you're eating there. So town can be expensive or rack up quickly. Some ways to help limit that cost: if there is a hostel available, that's usually going to be a little bit less expensive. If you get a hotel, you can go in on the hotel with a couple of different hikers to take down the cost. If you're going to be doing a 0, usually that would mean that you have 2 hotel stays or 2 stays in a town. So that night that you come in, or that day that you come in, and then that night that you're actually taking the 0. One thing that we really liked was to hike pretty close to where a road was to go into town. We would just sleep there that night, go in the next day to town, and then stay in the hotel that night. That way we can get the rest and recovery as a 0 day, but not have that added expense of an additional night in a hotel or hostel. Another expense is just going to be food. Food out on the West Coast is a little bit more expensive than on the East Coast. Usually breakfast, we're running around like $15 to $20 a plate. And our resupplies for, I would say, a 3 to 4 day carry, we're usually anywhere from like $60 to $90 I know that can depend on what you get, but just to set that expectation. And kind of on the same page as the shoes, there will be things that you have to get while you're on trail, more gear related. So through hiking pushes gear to its limits. And sometimes not only its limits, but it's just its lifespan. So with the shoes, you're going to be resupplying those. Socks, you're likely going to be buying different pairs. Water filters might be something that you're replacing too. So just expense of gear that you'll have to replace.
So our last kind of big topic is wildfires. And this picture was taken at our time on trail, and the smoke plume in that is from the park fire, which was a really large fire that blew up very quickly while we were on trail. And this was a very new experience to us. We are born and raised on the East Coast, so we have not grown up or have had a lot of experience with wildfires. And so this affected our hike kind of in ways that we were not expecting. So the first is obviously closures and evacuations. So the trail closures are determined by the Forest Service or by NPS, whoever the entity is that kind of owns that land, and also by the evacuation orders that happen kind of on a local level, so county or the like. So just to clarify, it is not the PCTA closing the trail. This is coming from other bodies who are closing the trail. The PCTA has set up a way to notify you when that happens, which is via their website. So when these closures happen, something to keep in mind is that the closure is not just for the PCT. Most of the time, Forest Service and NPS, which is the National Park Service, specify outright the Pacific Crest Trail between these mile markers are closed, but there are other closures that are in place. The Forest Service will release full closures that will be a whole boundary that the PCT might run through. And as I mentioned, there will be additional local closures of roads and evacuation orders as well. Sometimes there are reroutes available depending how far the PCT is into the closure. And the PCTA is really good about posting a reroute option if there is one. I'm going to just call this the official reroute. So on their page, they will have the closure and then the official reroute. They do work with Far Out, and Far Out does get updated. It will have alerts telling you you're coming to a closure, and then it will put in purple the reroute. There is a lag though, so if you're in a situation that is changing very quickly, I really recommend checking the PCTA website directly instead of relying on Far Out. This happened to us where literally fire closures were being lifted the day we got there. And then also remember that just because a reroute is not listed does not mean there isn't an option. You can always create your own using All Trails Gaia is also another really popular one to do it. Just absolutely make sure when you're planning that reroute that you are still not walking through a closure area. It is illegal, and it does put yourself and then the search and rescue folks at harm if you are where you're not supposed to be. So when you're coming up with a reroute, again, just make sure that you're still outside of the bounds and you're not on other trails or other land that is also additionally closed. Another thing was smoke. So smoke, the trail doesn't close for smoke. So you might very well be on open parts of trail and find the smoke levels to be too horrendous and have health consequences for you. Last year, there was a fire around Crater Lake, and while parts of the trail were open, they posted that the air quality was so bad. It was the equivalent to smoking a pack of cigarettes every 10 minutes. That is a lot. So just another thing to consider when you're thinking about reroutes or getting around fires is consider the smoke as well. Google has a phenomenal way to track air quality. If you just do Google air quality near me, you'll get a map and it's colored and it's so easy to use. And we found that to be pretty accurate. And we even had to scrap a whole reroute because the smoke was so bad. And what are the apps that can help with this? Far Out, is the big one that we've talked about. That is your main trail navigation. That's going to have a lot of information on it. Next is Watch Duty. If you are from the West Coast, you are probably already familiar with this app. We learned about it while we were out there. It is a free app that sources all wildfire information and is updated very, very, very regularly. It has a map of the fire, the acreage, how contained it is. It lists all of the evacuation orders, so you can see them right there, as well as all other closures. So it will call out by names all of the road closures and the like, and is just really just a great tool to have for you to be able to see what the fire situation is. The next is the Pacific Crest Trail Closures app. So this is like the app version of the PCTA website, and it only shows you the PCT, right? So it's not going to show you all of the affected closure areas. So just keep that in mind. And you can kind of, it's an easier way to see than the website. It also has a map, so you can see their reroutes on it. And that's going to be updated way quicker than Far Out will be. And we used that a couple times. The reroute we wanted was not updated on Far Out yet, but it was already updated on this map. And while you may not have the icons of water and the like, still a great way to know which direction you're going.
Yep. And those are downloadable too, so you can have them even if you don't have service. So that concludes our PCT workshop. We do have a lot of other information on our website. We have blogs. We also have some videos covering more extensively into some of the topics that we touched about today. So take a look at those items too. Happy hiking.